It feels like we're going through times like never before. It feels like this is going to be a Christmas like no other. However, 80 years ago, people in Coventry were celebrating their first Christmas since the city was bombed. And we're going to spend some time reflecting on that first Christmas. Firstly, by hearing from the broadcast made by Provost Dick Howard from the cathedral ruins on Christmas Day. And then we'll hear from Barbara and Charles, who were there in Coventry, and they are going to be sharing their memories of Christmas. And we'll find that there are lessons and experiences that they had then that will probably resonate with us now. So I hope you enjoy it.
I am speaking from the ruins of Coventry Cathedral. 6 weeks ago, the enemy came and hurled down fire and destruction upon our city from the sky. Early this morning, here under these ruins, in the lovely little stone chapel built 600 years ago, we began the day with our Christmas communion, worshipping the Christ, believe me, as joyfully as ever before. The Church of Christ is very much alive in Coventry today. And all over the city we've had, or we're going to have, our family gatherings and Christmas dinners. What we want to tell the world is this, that with Christ born again in our hearts today, we are trying, hard as it may be, to banish all thoughts of revenge. We are bracing ourselves to finish this tremendous job of saving the world from tyranny and cruelty. We're going to try to make a kinder, simpler, a more Christ-childlike sort of world in the days beyond this strife.
Barbara and Charles are founder members of St Christopher's Church, and they shared with me some of their memories of that first Christmas time after the Coventry Blitz. It's great to be virtually with Barbara and Charles, who are founder members of our church community, and thank you for joining me for this conversation, Barbara and Charles. It's 80 years since Coventry was blitzed, and you were both in Coventry at the time.
Well, it was a sad time because my grandmother died in the raid, and so my mother was obviously feeling a bit low that period. I was working at the time as an office boy, but the factory got bombed. So I was transferred to the Dunlop Aviation as an office boy. And so I was cycling to work in the dark.
Gosh. And what do you remember? So what do you remember about that first Christmas after the bombing? Can you remember much about it?
Well, mainly we were quite relieved that there was no bombing about at that time because the weather was not that good with mist and fog. So it was a more relaxed time that you feel that you could just forget about that side for a short time.
Yeah.
And it meant that because of the blackout, there was no lights at all. It was quite dark everywhere. So it's so dark that my present was as I remember, was a rear light for my bicycle because the cars couldn't pick up the reflector. My present was a red rear light, I remember quite a big with batteries in it and a bracket to go on the back of the bicycle.
Gosh.
And that was the big one, plus some gloves to help me cold in the winter.
Of course. It's funny because I'm not sure that many children would be very impressed with getting a rear light as their main present for Christmas nowadays.
I think one of the first things was the fact it was so shortly after all the bombing in Coventry, and so to get some sort of normality where my brother and my brother was a 2-year-old who had been put to bed in the Anderson shelter every night over that period, because you never knew when the bombers were coming over, and my brother was put to bed down there quite early when it got dark, ready for when the sirens went. And so with some relief, we were sleeping at home in the house. And I think that would be the overriding, as Charles has already said, you felt relaxed. We could go to bed normally. I remember my parents having strips of paper for us to glue together to make paper chains to decorate the house, because you couldn't go out and buy decorations like that. So I can remember sticking pieces of paper into a chain, coloured paper to put up. And for Christmas, I always had a Christmas stocking and usually a new dress. That was always the exciting thing. I had a new dress to wear when we visited our grandparents, normally on Christmas afternoon, and all a big family get together. And but I'm fairly sure that year my mother would have made one, because she was a sewer anyway. She always had her sewing machine going, and she would have made one. So that would have been just hanging on to family occasions, doing family things, and the neighbours coming in and things like that. I mean, we had good neighbours, and if they had some chocolate, they would, because sweets, remember, was short, chocolate was short, everything was short, food was short. So it was going to bed, and I suppose waking up with my Christmas stocking. What would have been in it, I can't imagine, because fruit was short. You couldn't get oranges, or the nuts wouldn't have been as plentiful, if there were any at all. Yeah. And but you always had a new coin in your Christmas stocking, always a new coin. So I would have had a pretty shiny coin or two, I suppose, that time. I think, again, like now, the security of family life was absolutely vital. And my father, after the bombing, has had to move away from Coventry because they took people in ammunitions or any work away from the city to work. Okay. And so, but men were given Christmas Day off that year. But of course, again, men were working long hours every day, because we're in a pretty poor state in this country. Impact of the cathedral being bombed was, the impact was bad and really distressing.
It was a sad thing. My father was with my uncle in the ruins looking for evidence of, they'd been to council house to try and trace my auntie, who had been at the scene of the bombing and was injured. They couldn't find her, that she'd been moved to Warwick Hospital. But whilst they were in that area, the George the Sixth, the King, and Morrison, the Home Secretary, visited the ruins, but they saw them at that moment, that time. I don't know whether they were in the ruins, but they certainly saw them. And of course, later on, we know full well they stood in the ruins. And
and that's the remarkable thing, is that post-war, lots of German students came over to help clear the rubble. And hence, really, the active reality of us all being reconciled. And I've very strong feelings about it all, really. Yeah. So best be careful, because, in fact, as you well know, so many of my family are away from Coventry in England, and therefore reconciliation is something that's so important to us all.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, that sums up, I guess, why that Christmas 1940, though so challenging, was so special, that Provost Howard had that determination to say, no, we're going to seek reconciliation, we're going to seek peace, because that's what Jesus would do.
Exactly. I was going through the same thought process, that God doesn't expect division amongst those of us on earth, and it's up to us to do all we can for others wherever they are.
Well, everyone was
lucky that we had any things in for Christmas, but we were a family, and Charles the same, caring about each other, and trying to get enough to eat, I think, because food was rationed.
Yeah.
And not shortly after that, my mother I remember, bought little day-old chicks, and we started raising chickens so that we could have chicken to eat.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Yeah.
Eggs. And if you had eggs, you had to give up your egg ration, because you'd got some chickens that absolutely true. You didn't get your egg ration anymore. What you had happy, really. I think that you make a laugh out of everyday life if you just get on with it. Face up to what's going on. We didn't go, I remember quite well, the night before the bombing, the city was surrounded with flares. Again, it was a light night, clear night, and the city was surrounded with flares dropped by planes doing a reconnaissance.
Oh gosh!
And the night before they actually came, and
well, on the actual night, I was sleeping at Fillinley. My family, my sister, had been so upset by the earlier short bombardments before the main raid, and she'd been feeling so worried about it, and so my mother and father arranged for us to have a room in Fillinley village.
Oh wow!
We were cycling. They went on the Midland Red, but the father and I cycled up to Fillinley, up the Tamworth Road, and that's one of the reasons it was good to have a rear light for a bicycle later.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your memories of that time, and it's lovely to hear them. And it's a lovely reminder that actually, you're right. Ultimately it's the simple things that matter. It's like, the gift of family, the gift of each other that we have, and I think that's a helpful lesson to hold on to in these strange times.
Absolutely, very similar situation.
Well, thank you both, Barbara and Charles. It's lovely to
Thank you.
Thank you.